panelists. I would like to start with the most infamous question in all of workforce development history. Please tell us about yourself.
So my name's Wendy Jonathan. I'm an actively producer, editor. My background is in journalism, so I still call myself a reporter. I work strictly in nonfiction, video production. I guess we can go all the way back to the beginning. I got my start as a print reporter, and then I went to UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism, where I studied documentary. I transitioned from there, graduated in 2013, transitioned from there to video production. I was freelance for about a year, and then I joined the team at AJ Plus, Al Jazeera's social media and digital network, before it launched, and I helped them build content, develop their aesthetic, and build out an audience, and worked for them for a couple years after launch. I moved over to Fusion, which is owned by Univision, helped them build out a digital brand using social media-driven videos until they merged with the Gawker Gizmodo empire. And then I started working with Gizmodo. I was at Gizmodo until about a year ago. I left to pursue bigger projects, went freelance, started working on my own film, have worked on a few other films, and then about 2 months ago I joined the Seeker team, which is a digital, we'll just call it the digital side of Discovery, plus one of the sister companies of NowThis, Dodo and Thrillist. And I actually just left Seeker 1 hour ago, so I'm still actively there. So I'm still working, and I'm still working on my film, which is going into edit right now, and then I'm editing some other folks' films. So that's my synopsis.
My name's Natalie. I'm a producer and impact strategist. I went to San Francisco State University and I studied cinema and ethnic studies and communications there, and really attribute a lot of my career trajectory to my experience there studying those disciplines. I found my experience in San Francisco State to be very politicizing. I got a really good political education there, and I've been seeking out the intersections between media and social justice and social change work since then. So I'm a producer. I've produced a web series with an organization called ITBS that receives funding from the Corporate for Public Broadcasting. That's called The F Word. It's about adopting from foster care. I also produced a short film called American Paradise that premiered at Sundance in 2016, and then we went on to create a feature film based on that, which we did 25 days of production on earlier this year, and that film's called The Last Black Man in San Francisco, and that's currently in post-production. So when I'm not producing, I am working on films that have already been completed and doing community outreach and impact work on those films. So I'm doing that for a couple documentaries right now, some that are doing a limited theatrical release, some that are on digital platforms, and I'm doing impact work on those. So I kind of dabble here and there between producing content and then helping that content find their audiences. So it's a good time in the freelance world, and I'm excited to hear more about your aspirations and help you along your way.
Cool. Hi everyone, my name's Yasmin, and I'm a producer also and a filmmaker. I got my start basically making work during college at UC Santa Cruz. I graduated from the film and digital media program there and moved straight into commercial production here in San Francisco. And I was freelancing for a while, got to know the amazing production community here in San Francisco, and then found my way working in a variety of production companies and agencies, ad agencies, here in the Bay Area. And I've also, and that's kind of what I'm doing right now, I'm a freelancer producing video and photo content, but I'm also working on my first feature-length documentary and about to start post-production on that. And what else? I've worked, done a lot of work with experimental video production and installation as well. And that's me.
All right. I'm Nomi Talisman. I think I'm the only person here who have absolutely no background in film. I studied fine arts, and I kind of migrated into films within art making. I was using mostly photography and video, and kind of like one thing led to another, and I found myself with a documentary short that was animated a few years ago, and I'm working on my first feature-length documentary, which is going to be animated too. When my films are not making enough money, which is always just do all kind of basically freelance work.
All right, excellent. So thank you, panelists. My next question is, what did you want to be when you were young?
A filmmaker. A filmmaker, but I didn't go to film school because everybody said it's like there's not going to be any career in that. But for some reason they thought that the art school is going to be better.
At least you had that.
So hey, it's like anyway.
That's good.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there were a bunch of other things, during depends on the week, depends on.
Tell us about it. Tell us about that.
Which part?
The different things you wanted to be depending on the week as you were growing up.
Okay, I have a 9-year-old kid who now says that he wants to get a British citizenship so he can play soccer for England. And I kind of like remember that type of thinking. It's kind of like, oh, I'm going to be really good at, playing piano without ever practicing and, stuff like that. So I think that actually I always wanted to make art, and it evolved into film. It was for a minute it was music, even though I cannot play a single instrument. So it's kind of I was around there.
Cool. My undergrad is actually in biology and math, which I graduated, I won't tell you what year, but I graduated from pretty much the same college as Mills, but in Georgia. I had actually had aspirations to get into film because I realized at a pretty early age that I like movies more than most people, a lot more than most people, but it seemed daunting, and my family was like, don't do that, you won't make money, you won't have a career, you won't have anything. And so I kind of left that behind and thought, well, I'll just go into biology. But I didn't want to study just one thing for the rest of my life, which is what biology would have, that's the path you go down, or just a few things. I wanted to study a lot of things. I wanted to learn so much and not stop. And so I kind of found this intersection in science journalism, but I didn't have any journalism experience. So I started from the bottom, and as soon as I broke into this nonfiction storytelling world, I just knew. I often talk about it the way people talk about their marriages, where I'm like, the first time I entered in this world, I knew it was going to be how I was going to spend the rest of my life, no matter how hard or challenging or frustrating it is. There's nothing else that's felt as comfortable for me as storytelling does. Across mediums, but film is my favorite.
I think I wanted to be an actress. And then I went through that awkward, teen, I guess you just call that puberty. And then I was like, oh, I'm awkward. I don't want to be in front of I don't want to be on stage. But I did do a lot of musical theater and dance and performance. So I think I wanted to be a performer. And then when I was thinking about college, and I didn't know what I wanted to study, I actually had an inverse experience in regards to parents and film school. My mom was like, you watch a lot of movies. Why don't you go study cinema? And I was like, yeah, okay. So that's how that happened.
I had a similar story to you, but it wasn't that I wanted to be an actress. Everyone around me told me that I should be an actress when I was a kid, because I loved putting on plays and pretending and all sorts of things. And I actually did act in a couple plays in school, which was really fun. But yeah, like you, Wendy, I was a storyteller from a very, very young age, and that has always resonated, and kind of took that into my art making. And when I got hold of a camera, my mom gave me my first still camera, and I started taking pictures. I just saw everything from a different lens, so to speak, through the camera, and the whole world opened up. So that was really interesting to me. And once I started adding motion to it, all these different layers of story came out. And yeah, so sorry, not too far from what I originally intended. So, but yes, my parents were very. They were not very happy with my choice to go to film school. They're like, you need to study computer science or something. And I'm like, nah. So, yeah.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of times our parents say, if you really want to piss them off, just take a future or career in the arts. Yes. Thank you, panelists. My next question is, was there ever like a defining moment when, you know, you had an experience like, this is my jam. I want to make films. I want to tell stories. And if so, I would love it if you could share that experience with the studio audience.
I mean, for me, it goes back to that moment I was talking to earlier, and unfortunately, it's not anything to do with film. But I had been interning at San Francisco Bay Guardian, if you all remember that, 10 years ago. And I didn't know anything about the Bay Area or journalism, and Steve Jones at the time said, hey, the Alcohol Beverage Control Agency is cracking down at these venues. Will you just go take a look and see what's happening? And so I couldn't get in touch with them during the day, so I rode my bike over there and talked to each one of them, took notes, and then I walked into his office and said, I have your notes ready for you. And he looked at me, he didn't look at me, he just kept typing and said, this is your story. And he said, by the way, it's going to be a feature, so make it good. Yeah. And he just kept staring straight at the screen, and I started sweating, and my jaw dropped, and I was just like, what do you mean? What is good? And so I went home and spent the whole weekend chewing off my nails and writing it, and then he published it the next week, and as soon as that happened, as soon as I realized I had been able to make a story, construct a narrative out of this political thing that was happening that touched on the culture of San Francisco and this beautiful city, that was it. I was like, this is what I'm going to do, and how do I make this my career and branch into that. And so from there, I took 3 more internships and then grad school, and I'm still working at it, still building my career. Yeah.
Shall I go?
Go for
okay.
it.
Yeah, like I mentioned, my education at San Francisco State was really foundational for me, and so my moment was when I was a student there, and I had gotten involved in the College of Ethnic Studies, and there was, I don't know if folks remember this, but in 2010 in Arizona, there was a bill that was passed that was outlawed Mexican American studies being taught in public schools. And so there was a documentary that was made about this called Precious Knowledge. And I went and saw a screening of that film at USF, and the filmmakers were there, and it was kind of the first time that I saw a documentary that really resonated with something that I was experiencing. So I was deeply involved in my education in ethnic studies, and then I became very politicized around this outlawing and how unjust that was in Arizona. So it was kind of the first time where I saw a film that was connected both to a larger political context and connected to my own education personally. And so that was a big kind of aha moment for me, realizing how films, by moving you emotionally, moving your hearts and minds, quote unquote, is a really important part of political struggle and social change. So I then got connected to an educator that was in Oakland that was implementing an ethnic studies program at Castlemont High School in East Oakland, and I started making a documentary about her program there. It's really funny to think about how I managed this with my schoolwork as a junior, but I was commuting there from the outer Sunset, getting there at 8 in the morning out to East Oakland and working on this documentary just independently. Unfortunately, I didn't finish that film ever. I kind of bit off more than I could chew, but I do think about that as my pivotal moment of thinking about film as a tool for social change work, and that's always been my orientation into what I'm producing and how I'm helping that film find its community audience.
For me, I think the pivotal moment was when I wrote my first film and kind of concepted, storyboarded, and then directed it, kind of did everything with a small team of people, and seeing the finished product, like from what it was in my head to seeing it actually on a screen, like that was really amazing. It was kind of like, whoa, like you can take this concept that's in your head and bring it out into the world, and you're working with, I mean, I'm a very collaborative person, so the medium lends itself to collaboration, and that really worked for me, like working with different people to make something happen. I think that's really special and important, and a lot of times it doesn't always turn out the way you think it will, but it may even turn out better because of all the input. So for me, that was my moment where I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, you get all these people together and you make this thing that was in your head into reality, and you can impact other people by what you're saying on screen too. So that was when I realized, okay, this is what I want to do. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of one. It's kind of like it's really hard to
it's
come
really
up
hard.
with one thing, but the few things that kind of like I always go back to, I think I'm going to think about, kind of like what turned me on films. I grew up in Israel, and it's in a very small town, but my cousins lived in Jerusalem, just behind the museum, and it had like an incredible basically a kids wing and a kids program, and every time that I would go and stay, for a weekend or the summers with them, we would go on Saturday mornings to watch a movie, and it was always something like really good. It was like Chaplin, or they had all the Marx Brothers, and I remember walking back with my cousin who was a little bit older, and she was really into films, and I remember walking back from the museum all the way to their house. It's probably like a mile, and cracking up, just couldn't stop laughing all the way from the minute that the film ended until we got home. And when I went to art school, I think that pretty much at around the same time, two things that kind of really blew my mind was early photographs of Nan Goldin, and Roger and Me came out at pretty much the same time. And there were two things that I felt like, it's like, oh, there's really a room to tell these really terrible stories, and also with a lot of emotions around them, and it's kind of like, they're hopeless, but there is hope. There's definitely humor. And I thought that there was just two things that kind of like totally spun around for years, and kind of came back to.
So take
I'm
note,
old.
y'all. Oh, I'm sorry, please.
No, just what I said, that also dates me, but that's okay.
So take note, y'all. Sometimes it's not just like one moment, but it's like a series of moments that makes that voice in the back of our head just get louder and louder and louder until you can't say no to it anymore, right? Thank you, panelists. My next question is, what was the very first production cinema job you ever had?
What do you mean?
Like, what was your first job ever? Like not in this field or space.
IHOP.
Tell us about that.
I was a hostess. I wanted to be a busboy, but they wouldn't let me because I was a girl. So I was a hostess, and then I held series of jobs at the mall. And then I was a bartender up until grad school. So throughout all of my print freelance career, I was a bartender. It wasn't until I got out of grad school and was freelancing in video production specifically that I was able to leave bartending behind, which is great. I sleep all the hours of the night.
I was in childcare and did babysitting. Yeah, before. And then I guess I would count my job at BAVAC as not being production related, even though that's a media arts nonprofit. But funny enough, I started working at BAVAC as working on a documentary. And then somehow I got a job doing admissions for a workforce development program. Don't know how they thought I was qualified for that, but it was a huge blessing because I got it was really my professional, gave me a professional skill set and learned how to work on teams and in an office space. So it was a huge blessing to have that opportunity. And then I ultimately moved on to get back closer to film.
I first job ever, I think, was in a clothing store in the mall, and then a coffee shop, and then restaurants, many restaurants, as a waitress, and then let's see what else. Did a bunch of weird admin stuff for different people. I worked at, I don't know if you guys know this place, but S.H. Frank. It's a wholesale leather wholesale leather seller, whatever you call it, in the Mission, and they've been around forever, since like the 1800s or whatever, but it's like past, other people bought it. So I was like helping their sort of orders and like selling, whatever, putting in orders, and the guy who ran it is kind of crazy, but it was he was a very big fan of the art, so he always supported me in my gigs whenever I had to take off. So yeah, I've done a lot of really weird random things. So yeah.
So babysitting, kitchen work, house cleaning. There was another weird one. I worked at the post office. So basically sorting mail at night shifts.
Can I say one thing, Aria?
Yeah.
This is just a little bit off topic because I'm just reflecting on me talking about getting that job at Bayback, and also one of the students that Aria connected me to sent me an email about applying for jobs and feeling underqualified. And I just want to encourage everybody to never feel underqualified for a position that you're going after. Don't ever count yourself out because you don't have the skill set that you think you need for that position. Because if you're humble and willing to work hard and learn, you can do the job. The film that I made earlier this year, there was somebody who reached out to us via our Facebook page and wanted to help as a production assistant, and we got a fair amount of these emails, and a lot of times I wrote folks back and I said, okay, you want to help, here's what you can go do. And most of the time they never do anything, right? This one kid, this was the time when we were literally knocking on doors around San Francisco asking people for free food to feed our crew because we didn't have any money. And so I said, hey, you're from San Francisco, do you know anybody who works in restaurants? Will you call them and ask them to give us free food? And he was like, absolutely. And then he's emailing me and he's like, I got this free food here, I got this free food here. And I was like, you're amazing. Who are you? Let's get coffee. I haven't even met you. And then he ended up being a production assistant on our film set, and everybody loved him. And he was a college student. I mean, and now he moved down to LA. He's going to film school, and he's interning with Plan B Entertainment, which is Brad Pitt's production company. So literally, I'm clearly very proud of my protege, in case you can't tell. But this is just a story to tell you, like, don't feel like you can't do something because you don't have the experience. Just go for it and be willing to work hard, and that's going to get you far.
Yeah. Willing to learn is sometimes better than cocky.
Totally.
Yeah.
Willing to learn and willing to work hard and figure it out and being reliable. I think that's the most important thing, because a lot of people say they'll do something and then they don't. And then you're just like, now what?
And being a part of a team, you could be the most dynamic, amazing, whatever, director of photography or like editor or anything. But if you can't work with a team, I don't want you on my team. Yeah. And you'll get kicked off pretty soon. So, I mean, it is absolutely, films are, probably some good ones have been done by one person alone, but I can't think of any.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I did not tell Natalie to say that, by the way. You work with me and know that I say that to y'all all the time. Did not tell her to say that. So that's
He didn't tell me to say that.
Not a plan. Thank you, panelists. What was your first production gig? Like, in the cinema game, in the storytelling game? I would love if you could share that experience with the studio audience.
Like where we got paid?
Yeah.
Okay.
My first film was my thesis film, which did air on PBS. Everything I did in grad school was for publication or intended to. So it wasn't paid, but I produced and shot and edited a film on a small Russian community living in Alaska that was religiously zealous. After that, I couldn't tell you because I I gripped for a car commercial. I edited for Al Jazeera America. I did some stuff for I mean, it was just everywhere until I landed the first thing. And I've worked on other people's films, and I haven't launched I've launched my first film since grad school. I launched it last December. We're going into edit now. So, and that's also unpaid. It's the opposite of unpaid. It's negative paid.
You're losing money.
Yeah.
I think the first time I got paid for a production job was working on the documentary in partnership with Bayvac. I think I got a stipend for that. So that was an interesting team because we didn't really have titles. It was a collaborative production team of like 7 of us. So that, yeah, but I got that because of all the unpaid stuff that I did during college, the internships and the going out on my own and making that documentary about the East Oakland High School. So when you have the ability to do stuff without pay, then that will help you get the paid stuff eventually.
Yeah, I had a year total of unpaid internships before I landed a gig. That's 4 different unpaid internships.
Yeah, speaks to some of the difficulty of sustainability in this field for sure.
Oh, yeah. My first paid gig in this world was as a PA on a commercial here in San Francisco. It was insane, but super fun. Very, very long day. And I got paid like $100, $200, something like that, which was pretty good. I was like, hey, maybe I can do more of this slave labor. But yeah, that's kind of how it started.
I got a grant, and then it was taught by something else, just right out of art school to do a photo-based documentary work. So it's kind of nearly paid for me. Mostly paid for materials, but it was right out of school, very quickly out of school. So that was pretty great. I'm trying to think in film, and then I had some other mostly photo-based paid gigs before I moved here. I don't remember. I did not really work on other people's productions. A little bit. I'm actually doing something now. Mostly through my own work, and then someone just freelances. Somebody would come and say, "It's like, no, can you just help us, edit this thing that they feel like it's like, okay, we need somebody to do that." It's like, I think it's pretty good to go, but and it was mostly through people that I knew, and it started with kind of little support with stuff that went into some in-house tech companies, and eventually it kind of developed into kind of steadier and better paid gigs.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So sometimes we can see that the things that are unpaid actually end up paying us better than money ever could.
Oh yeah.
Right? So if you come and work with me, for example, I'm always telling you, every opportunity matters, Thanks for confirming that, panelists. I appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. What is the most important non-technical skill one needs to have to be successful in production?
Communication.
Writing.
Yeah.
Writing,
is
definitely.
Top. Like, if you can't communicate clearly or directly, and I've had an issue with that because a lot of times people, like, I'll be like thinking out loud, and people are like, what do you want? So I've had to train myself to be really clear in my communication, especially when I'm producing or directing, and also conflict management and resolution, and sort of playing this dance between being too demanding versus taking people's needs into consideration versus getting the job done. So there's like this whole thing, and then also like how people listen. So a huge part of how you communicate is how would someone hear you and how you speak to them. So yeah, I think communication is huge, and being really prompt in communication and production is really important, because a lot of times it's a matter of money, like getting a gig. If you don't respond right away, like someone else will get the gig. So like definitely being on top of that, responding to emails, responding to phone calls, those are all key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can say coming from print to film, my writing skills haven't, like the priority on being able to write clearly and efficiently hasn't gone down at all. You know, I mean, not just script writing, but also emails and expectations. And yeah, if in any one of my groups that post gigs, if you don't respond that you want the gig within, 45 minutes to 2 hours, you don't get the gig.
Yeah. Sure.
Somebody else is going to get it. There's a lot of hungry people. Me too.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. I just like to know who's in the room. How many people want to work in production, like in narrative? In narrative? Yeah? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this feature film that I made, so I made a short film that was a narrative, and then this feature film that I made was my first feature. And yeah, the promptness of the communication I have to emphasize also. It's funny because you kind of forget that, in normal professional settings, like 24 hours is kind of a normal response period. In film, it's like an hour. And so it's funny, like if I'm not talking to a film vendor, like if I'm talking to somebody who's not a film vendor, I'm like, why is this person not calling me back? Like why are you going so slow? Okay, now I really digress. But there was that movie like Zootopia where they go to the DMV and it's like the sloths behind the counter. Like that's what interacting with people in the real world feels like when you're in production. So yeah, and also like being reliable. I mean, because film is such a highly collaborative medium, you need. It really means like it brings new definitions to time as money. Truly, and so. And it doesn't matter what position you're in. If you're the director of photography or you're a production assistant, everybody is critical. And if you drop the ball, like that affects everybody. And so being reliable and being on the ball is like, that's what's going to make you rise in this industry. And if you drop the ball, you have to communicate about it. Like, I had production assistants working with me that were a little bit more green, and it's like, one of them was driving a van, and then she like hit something, and then she didn't tell me because was like afraid of being in trouble or something, right? And so I understand that, but like, I need you to tell me when something happens so that we can problem solve. Like, and I'd much rather you do that, or like, and this production assistant I had working with me, she had a death in her family. And we kept her on board because she still wanted to work. And then we had like a 4 a.m. call. And then she tells me like that morning that she's like not showing up with the van. And I'm like, okay, well now I'm in a huge lurch and now I can't like bring you back, And she didn't communicate with me like the day before being like, hey, I'm in a bad place, like so that I can make arrangements, right? So communication, being reliable, and when you make a mistake, like just, own up to it, because if you're on a healthy crew, like there's this camaraderie of like, we're all in this together. Everybody makes mistakes and like we are on the same side. So like, let's work together to problem solve when mistakes happen. Mistakes are inevitable. But we have to communicate about them so that we can work together as a team. And along with reliability is like timeliness. Like if you're late to call, like, bye. Again, because like time is money, right? Like I had a producing teacher in college, and the first thing he told us was like, if call time's 5:30, like you're there at 5:15, right? Like you're there early. And yeah, if you're on time, you're late, right? So timeliness, reliability, communications, and then also like being pleasant to work with under pressure is huge. It's a very, very stressful situation working in production. It's very high stakes and it's kind of addicting that way. But because you're under high pressure, maintaining a pleasant demeanor in that environment will also get you jobs.
Yeah, it's in addition to sort of communicating mistakes, especially when you first enter, somebody's going to be like, "Oh, you can shoot all these things?" And you're going to be like, "Yeah, definitely I can. I've done similar things to that." And you're going to go out there and you're going to meet challenges that you didn't expect to face. You're going to meet challenges that are challenging for even the most skilled and experienced shooter. And coming back to that producer, coming back to that editor and being realistic instead of saying, "Oh yeah, I got you, totally got you everything, you're fine." You know, and being like, "Hey, I got you everything, but that one shot on the cliff was challenging for this reason, and maybe it's overexposed." That is a lot easier to hear as a producer than it is to see in the footage later where I'm like, "Whoa, this shot's completely unusable. Why didn't I know that until now?"
Right.
You know, and that sort of runs across the board, and that's something that happens a lot in the beginning of your career where you're not lying and saying that you can do something you can't, but you are sort of overextending yourself, hoping you'll rise up. Just being very honest about what happened and how it happened is a lot better than finding out the production van has a dent in it.
Okay, so if I heard correctly, and I'm summarizing correctly, communication, not only specifically clear communication, but asking strong questions, actively listening, response time, being forthright about mistakes and when you're behind schedule, being pleasant to work with under stressful situations, aka everyday life, every minute of 2018.
2016.
What was that?
And 2016.
And 2016. Did I miss anything?
Reliable.
Reliable, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Very important. Very important. Okay, thank you so much, panelists. I was kind of creeping around taking photos for LinkedIn, and I noticed I didn't see a lot of questions on those note cards. Don't forget, in 10 minutes we're going to be taking a break, and I want to see some questions from the studio audience, because I don't have a lot more questions. Okay, panelists, tell us about your worst production experience.
Oh my God, why are you doing this to me, Aria?
Because you signed up and you love it. That's why.
Oh. God, you know, I think it was like a near worst production experience, but I had first started, I was PAing for a car commercial, $200 a day, which to me was like a percentage of my rent. So I was like, great, yeah, I'll take this, you know, especially at the time. But I was, you know, I was very eager to get a lot of jobs. I was lining stuff up as much as I can. I didn't say no to anything. Yeah, of course, I'll work on it. So the director, we were up in Marin, and the director was like, "Oh, I forgot this lens. Will you go back to Berkeley in my car and get it?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So I'm like driving his car. I don't normally do this, nor do I condone this, but I was checking my email to respond to somebody about a gig the next day. And I came millimeters away from wrecking his car into somebody else's car. Millimeters. And if that had happened, that's another thing people don't talk about, but this industry is very small. And your reputation, if you have a bad attitude on one production set, everybody's going to know, and they're going to not want to hire you. So if I had wrecked that director's car because I was being thoughtless and quick and, you know, not focusing on the task at hand, I wouldn't be sitting right here, you know.
I'm so glad you raised this, because this is actually a huge safety concern, because we're telling you all that you need to respond to your emails and your texts really quickly. You may also be driving a production vehicle. So be careful. Don't text and drive. If your production manager is like texting you, be like, pull over and be like, "Hey, I'm driving. I'm getting to set, blah, blah, blah." Like, you know, let them know. It's a real thing. Like when I was, be careful when you're driving and needing to keep your response time.
There's so much things with freelance and with, you know, being on set that you have to juggle, you know, and I think it's easy if you let one thing drop. It's easy to let a few things drop, but one of those things might be a critical thing, like keeping your director's car in one piece.
Yeah. Because then other producers will call you and be like, "Hey, who'd you work with? Do you have any recommendations?" And, you know, the folks that have been reliable, you know, responsive, pleasant to work with are always top of mind. So, the other thing I was going to say is definitely, you know, if you haven't heard from anyone, you're working in production, because this happened to me a lot, and I kept thinking, "Oh my God, they don't like working with me." But what happens is that people who are producing shoots are so busy, they forget who is out there. And there's new people coming on all the time. So it's really key to keep in touch and call people and be like, hey, I'm available, hey, I'm this, like updating producers and people that you've worked with, or, you know, even DPs or directors you worked with, and letting them know you're freelancing or you're available on these dates really helps, because they won't remember. They won't remember. So yeah. What was the question?
Worst production experience.
You say.
I'm trying to think.
about that one.
I have to say that most of the stuff that kind of feel like, oh, I totally screwed up is usually on my own stuff. So it's kind of like, okay, you know, so I cost myself, I mean, it's still money, it's still time, but it's mostly just myself. It's a little bit different. You know, so if you've forgotten headphones, you can always stop at some Best Buy and get headphones, you know, or I don't know, whatever. I mean, I do remember it's like one time not having any of the plates for the tripods actually attached to the bike tripods.
yeah.
You know, it's just kind of like, it's like, how can I be so stupid? It's like, because I switched bags before I left home or something like that. But that usually I tend to do on my own stuff, less so on other people's stuff. I did work on, there was actually for a day job that I had, that was over 10 years ago, and it was a production that was going to go into, it was basically a legal case. But stakes was super high, and we were shooting interviews in the Ukraine. And there was just a moment that kind of like, I can't remember what it was, like I couldn't charge batteries or couldn't get tapes or something like that. It was kind of, okay, now everybody has to get up. It's like 7 in the morning and we have to go all around town to find, you know, where we can get whatever the adapters or tapes or whatever it was. And it was just a moment that kind of like, I can't even ship it to arrive fast enough, but it got resolved in some kind of weird way, I can't remember. But that stuff I tend to do I tend to do it less and less, but I tend to do it more in my stuff than when I work for other people.
Those are always learning experiences. Headphones, easiest thing to forget about.
Yeah.
And plates.
Oh yeah.
I actually now have in the bag where I put the equipment, I have 2 sticky notes. One of them says headphones, and the other one says tripod plates. You know, it's just kind of like, okay, got it covered.
I have to say that a lot of this stuff that we're talking about translates to the salaried office world as well. So when I get a job at Seeker AJ Plus and I'm salaried, and we're talking about building out a team, they come to me and they're like, well, who's good? Who should we hire? We're actively doing that at Seeker right now. And so I have memories of, oh, this person was great on set, this person was great there. And those memories of this person's great on set is stronger than this person's a great photographer. Because I'd rather have somebody who's a good team player than a strong photographer. And so that stuff translates over to getting, like, you know, a steady job as well.
Natalie, did you have one you wanted to share? 'Cause I know she didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think about, I actually just kind of had a post-mortem with my producing team on The Last Black Man in San Francisco, and we were reliving all of our very stressful days. I mean, as you can tell, or you've probably experienced already, working in production is just putting out fires as they come up. Our last week of shooting, we had like 17 locations around San Francisco in like 5 days. So we were moving around a lot, and we had like a very small locations team. We had like a 2 or 3 person locations team. So typically, you know, it was a union production. I've never worked with unions before. We can talk about that when the cameras are not rolling. But anyway, so we typically have what's called a base camp next to where your location is, but because we were moving around so much, we didn't have a base camp at every single location. So we were shooting this skating shot on California Street in Nob Hill, aka one of like the busiest intersections in San Francisco, and we had traffic control, and we had a skate double, and so we called the skate double for our lead actor, But then there was a miscommunication where we were actually supposed to call the skate double for the other lead actor because he knew how to do the hill better. And there was a lapse in communication where we were like, oh, we didn't know that we needed to call the other skate double. And because we didn't have a base camp nearby where they could change, we didn't have his costumes there. So we had to call the other skate double, get him over there, but we didn't have time to bring him all the way back to the other side of the city where his costume was to change. So we had to change. It was stressful. I don't want to say more because I don't want to. Yeah. When things aren't going online, I can tell you more stories. Yeah. So it's a very, very high stress environment, and it's not for everybody. But if you can stand the long hours and you can work under that kind of pressure, then it's really fun. You get kind of addicted to it's peaks and valleys. Because, we solved this problem, and I'm standing there on California Street, and I'm like, I'm literally a superhero. Like, I have superpowers. That was so stressful, but then look, we got the shot. And so there's something really rewarding about that. So yeah, if you like the adrenaline, then you might be cut out for this.
I think speaking to what you were saying about it's mostly happened on your own productions, I'll definitely attest to that. There have been several occasions where you go in for an interview and you're getting great footage, and you've got the audio and everything's awesome, and then you've got your camera assistant or whoever, the DIT, checking and making sure everything's good, and then you come home and the audio's not there. Or the camera A is not there. That's how, and you just get this sinking feeling, and you're like, what just happened? We were so careful, we were checking, we were doing everything, and maybe there wasn't a card in the camera, or maybe the person who's shooting didn't press record and they thought they had, there's just, so you just have to work with what you got. And we used B camera footage, and crappy audio or whatever, but just make sure you double, triple, quadruple check everything all the time.
Not pressing record is a thing that really happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
To
Very
the most, really
Very
does. I just saw Free Solo and Jimmy Chin showed up, and that was his concern. He was like, I was concerned people wouldn't press record. And I was like, that was your concern? I was like, you were on mild.
It happens.
Yeah.
It's a legitimate concern, though.
It's a legit
Very
good, especially if you put those cameras up there.
Exactly. Did all that work in real time.
Yeah.
Thank you, panelists. So now we're going to step into what I call the bonus round. Can you please pick a number 1 through 36?
We'll say 17.
What inspires you?
Oof. Solid narrative arcs. I'm trying to think of what inspires me to work on anything. I'm very passionate about environmental concerns and outdoor culture. I've done a lot of work in social justice, but the film that I'm working on, I came into it, it addresses homelessness in Oakland, and I didn't come to it because I'm very passionate about homelessness in Oakland. I mean, I am. I live there, and I care about people, but I never thought I'm going to spend a year and a half and a bunch of money working on this project. It was that I met this activist who had discussed this perfect narrative arc, and when she told me what it was, this just sort of star shone, and I was like, this is it. This has a start, a middle, and an end, and we can sort of couch social justice issues in it. There's not one thing that really gets me inspired. It's more just my hunger and my appetite for storytelling.
Thank you, Wendy. Natalie, number 1 through 36, that's not 17.
27.
Can you name 3 consecutive days without using the words Wednesday, Friday, or Saturday?
What?
Let me ask you another question.
Choose another number.
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday?
Without using Wednesday, Friday. Friday, Saturday.
Okay, who would win in a fight
Sunday.
between Spider-Man and Batman?
Oh. I've had this debate.
It's too bad you didn't pick that.
This is great because I'm actually writing a I'm writing a superhero treatment right now. So Spider-Man, I'm gonna go with Spider-Man. Do I have to try?
Please.
Yeah. I need this.
I don't know, because he can crawl on the walls. I don't know. I don't have a good answer.
That's okay.
Because he's light, and nimble.
Light and nimble. Okay, excellent. Excellent. Yasmin,
Yeah.
pick a number 1 to 36.
36. Uh-oh.
A penguin walks through this door right now wearing a sombrero.
Of course
What
I
does the
took
penguin
that
say,
question.
and why is the penguin here?
Let's go have some margaritas,
Nope.
man.
There we go. Happy hour post Workforce Wednesday crew panel.
It's on vacay for our Indian summer.
Yeah, where are the margaritas?
Okay, excellent. I'll allow it. I'll allow it. Okay, Nomi, final bonus round
We're all
question.
adults here, right?
Nobody picked small numbers, right?
They did not know.
All right. Do I need to choose?
Yes,
Yes.
please.
Still? Even,
Yes, please.
even though I
Pick a
said a
number.
small number? Okay.
Yes, please.
Should
17.
17, 27, 36, 5.
What is your favorite 90s jam?
What?
What's your favorite song from the
What?
90s? From the 90s.
Wow.
Told you, it's bonus round. You don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah, I can see that. There's so many.
I know.
Of the 90s.
I know. It's like,
Anything from, I don't know, Outcast to Hole. How's that?
That's a big spectrum.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. In the second half of our Workforce Wednesday Careers in Cinema panel, panelists, are there any challenges specific to being a woman, older, or both, or a person of color in the field? So considering like gender, non-binary.
Yes.
You have some thoughts on that
Yes.
issue? Please don't take it out on the water, but if you have some thoughts, we would love to hear those thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say because this is my world, and my world is video production, and I'm not sure if sexism is more prevalent in my world than the outside world, but it certainly is as prevalent, if it's not more so.
definitely prevalent.
So I get what I call the little lady talk all the time, where say, this happened to me a few months ago, I'm working with a nonprofit in New York that wants some digital video. They say, hey, we want to film this thing. Can we send you a hard drive and you tell us if it's something that can be made into a story? And I was like, yeah, sure. They had a third company film it. Dudes, sorry. And dude sent me the hard drive and I couldn't get the footage off of it. So I called him and I was like, hey, is something going on? Did you put it in a weird place? And he was like, well, ma'am, have you tried to drag it over into the project? And it's this whole like, little lady, do you understand editing? And you're just like, okay, hold on. I'm here with you. I'm on your level, right? I call it the little lady talk. And I just sort of have to be more authoritative. And, you know, at that point, I sort of put my foot down. I was like, listen, I'm talking to you because I'm in this industry and you need to talk to me like I'm on your level. Anyway, so I'm going to take my water bottle back. I can't speak to people of color. I have white privilege and that, but I can't speak to sexism, and it makes me pretty angry.
I can speak for old people. I mean, do all the people who we just mentioned in this question have harder time anyway? So I think the answer is yes. But I just want to point out actually something else that is kind of could be interesting in this particular arrangement is like you can also make your own crew. You can also make your own people around you. And I think that a lot of the time that is actually the answer. So yes, you will need to get hired by other people at the beginning, or you need to come up with some funding to start your own work. But there's also, first of all, there are a lot of people who might be able to relate to that. there are all kinds of groups that can help. I remember sitting on, going to a panel that I think was probably handled by Women in Film, maybe, I don't remember, in SF Doc Fest a few years ago. And I had a bunch of people on the panel, a bunch of women on the panel, or women identified people on the panel. And one of them said, get a skill that other people don't necessarily have, because it will give you an edge. So if you are a woman sound recorder, there might be a place that actually somebody might want a female-only crew, and you're going to have the one skill that is less available or less common. So there are all kinds of ways to go around it, but again, it's like, yeah, I'm sure that I can't answer for all these things, but it's like the rest of the world.
Yeah. I could definitely attest to sexism. As a PA, especially, you know, you always get stuck doing the like office PA stuff or go on runs with your car, whereas the boys are always like, oh, you know, come and help with the camera and the lens and da-da-da-da. And I'm a photographer, so for me that was my first, you know, interest, was like, I want to learn what's going on with the camera and whatever, and it was always like that. And then eventually I was like, whatever, you know. And when I started making my own stuff, like you said, I'm hiring my own people, and I think it was really cool because I hired this woman who's a DP, and it was so poignant because she actually was really concerned. I had worked with her before, but she was a new mom, and she's like, I'm breastfeeding, you know, is it okay? Like, you know, I'll, you know, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, it's totally fine. She's like, I'll have the nanny with me, and, you know, I'll, you know, take a break or what. I'm like, yeah, we'll make it work. Don't worry about it. And she was kind of blown away because she's like, I've had such a hard time finding work because I'm breastfeeding. And I know other women who are producers who have had to, you know, do all sorts of acrobatics to be able to work while being a new mom. And there's still a lot of sexism, and it takes one person to set that example. Like, she was so grateful to be able to work and have her baby on set, and it actually didn't make any difference. Like, it didn't impact us at all. You know, she took a little break, you know, the nanny was there, like, it was all fine. So it really, and I think Mira Nair, Mira Nair is one of my inspirations because so filmmaking is hard, long hours, you're away from your family for very long stretches of time, and one of the things that she would do on her film sets was she would invite the crew's family to come with them. And it's a lot of money, obviously, but she's Mira Nair, so she's getting a lot of money to make her films. But I think, again, it takes that one person to make that distinction, or, you know, make it okay to set an example for other people. And so, yeah, if people are judging you or treating you weird, you know, just kind of let it roll off your shoulders, but also definitely set your boundaries and be like, no, that's not okay. Like, maybe not in front of everybody, but like on a one-on-one level, be like, hey, you know, I can do just as much as this person can do. Maybe I'll do it differently. You know, like if I have to drag a cable, I might not just grab it and lug it over my shoulder, but I'll find like a dolly, and you know, I'll use my head to figure out how to do it, you know. But definitely it still exists, and it's sad, but, you know, gotta keep really clear about what your boundaries are, what your capabilities are, and hopefully one day when you're crewing your own productions, you can make those choices as well. So.
Awesome. Thank you, panelists. I want to create some space if anybody else wanted to speak as well.
I would probably just reiterate, yeah, I mean, it's definitely an industry that's dominated by a lot of white males, and if you're not in that category and you feel like you don't internalize any inferiority. Let it roll off of you, and also like be in solidarity with your people. Like when you will end up in positions where you're hiring or you're recommending, and like remember who your people are and help them get into those positions and help each other out. Being with, with other, just remember, give the people opportunities that you want to share space with in the industry, and don't internalize any of the discrimination, which is harder than it sounds. The feature that I was on, I was the unit production manager, and I had never even been on a film set big enough to see a UPM, let alone be one, of a 60 to 80 person crew on a union production. And I was I was supervising people that had, a decade of experience on me. And that was really intimidating. But I had to just know that, like the women, it was a pretty much all female production unit. All the producers were women. So I had spent about 6 weeks in prep, working with an all-female team, and then we get on set and it's like a lot of male crew members, because department heads handle their own hiring, right? So we didn't really have charge over who they were hiring as crew. So I just had to trust that my superiors were telling me I was doing a good job, even if I was getting side eye for what my IMDb looked like from the crew members that I was working with, right? I just had to know that, like, the people had my back and not internalize when people were showing me shade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you, panelists. Okay, panelists, what is something that you know now that you wish you had known when you were getting started in your career?
And I feel like I'm still building my career. So it's hard to think about, I guess I was starting it 10 years ago. I guess I was really getting going 6 years ago, but I'm still hungry and I'm still reaching and I'm still striving and I'm still learning. So I'm not sure I can answer that question for another 40 to 50 years. I think one thing that he had said earlier that's really important is to remember that as much as it sucks, unpaid work is what gets you work. So be humble. Take the jobs, because it was hard. It's hard to like swallow your pride and be like, well, I'll go on into my 6 month of not really making money, and it's hard to do that. But remember that every person who I admire in this industry has had peaks and valleys. Every person I admire outside of this industry has had peaks and valleys, and so remembering during lulls, both financially and creatively. There you go. Depend on your coworkers to help you out.
Yeah, every time you walk through, at least my experience in my career, I totally agree that I'm still building it. So it's kind of hard to have that retrospect. But what it's been like for me is every time you walk through a door, there's another door on the other side of that door and another door on the other side of that door, and you just have to know that when you take an opportunity, that's not the end. There's going to be another opportunity on the other side of that. And I can literally trace my career and every opportunity I've had to some opportunity that happened before that. So just keep that perspective and know that, it's step by step. One of the producers that I was working with, she had this expression, put on the socks and then the shoes. Socks and the shoes. This, then this. So, just keep chipping away. And, doors will continue to open.
I think for me it was the promptness of response, because I lost a lot of jobs not responding within the first half an hour. And I was like, what's happening over here? But you figure it out.
It's practical, less metaphor.
Yeah.
This is my advice.
Yeah. So that's what I can remember.
I would say from independent filmmaking, so not necessarily from that side, which I think all these are just sound advice, and it's also kind of really remember to listen to yourself. Mm-hmm. If somebody tells you they're going to do something for you and they're going to and they have this great resume and all that, and it just doesn't sit well with you, just walk away. Mm-hmm. And the other way around, it's like sometimes somebody will give you great advice, and you don't necessarily know them, and instead of second guess, it really rings true. It really rings like just go with it. Usually, I'm pretty good at that, but I have like one severe burnout. But mostly, I have to say I'm pretty good with that. So put people that you like and trust, and you feel like they're smart, and also always consider the source.
Yeah, that sort of goes back to the reputation. I mean, I've seen somebody has a bad attitude on set. I've seen it. They don't get jobs for 6 months. I've seen them be considered for staff positions, and somebody says, "Oh, I was on set with that person last year. They're terrible working with the team," and then that person's resume is bottom of the stack again. It's not. I'm not saying like your reputation, like, you know, what music you like. I mean, your reputation as somebody who can work on a team is really, really so much of whether or not you're going to get your next gig or not. So those doors are going to be there, but that door might not open if you were, you know, combative or late or, you know, didn't show up with everything you were expected to show up with.
May I ask a follow-up question to that?
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, some of us have bad days,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, is it the type of thing where, like, you know, you can have a bad day and then bounce back and everyone's like, okay, no, that was just a bad day? Or is it like, is it one bad day can ruin your rep? You know, because, you know, the saying is like, it takes a lifetime to build a rep in a moment to, like, ruin it, right?
I think it goes back to the communication you were saying earlier. You can have a bad day, you go back to the set next day, or you go back to the office next day and you're like, hey guys, so sorry that I snapped on you when you asked me to get you coffee.
Yes.
I didn't get much sleep. I'm on it now. If you're just sort of honest about it, I think everybody gets to have bad days.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I would agree. I would agree. Yeah, it's like, and it goes back to the teamwork piece of it as well. Of like, you know, we don't get. I mean, you probably have or will encounter people that are going to be mean to you in this industry because of how stressful it is, and it kind of. You know, but if you're working with good people, you're all on the same side. You know, you're all trying to make the dream work. You're all trying to get the thing made. So it's if you feel like you dropped the ball, if you have the ability to own that really does set you apart, because you know, it allows you to show that I've recognized this mistake and I'm taking responsibility for it, and that shows responsibility to your teammates and also to the thing that you're trying to create. So I think, you know, just don't, and it's difficult. It's like this little trip up that you can get, because we're like overemphasis, you know, we're putting so much emphasis on like, don't be late,
perfect.
Don't be, be perfect, you know, and it's like, yes, and that can also make you feel afraid, you know, of like when you feel like when you do make a mistake, you know, your whole life is over. I'm not saying that you think that, but you know what I mean. So yeah, when mistakes do happen, just, you know, you just have to own up to it, and then.
Thank you, panelists. Documentary or narrative? Which one do you like making better and why?
I'm a journalist, so documentary. I worked on one narrative, which was very weird. So in documentary, you sort of shoot, and then your story, I feel like the story really comes out in the edit room. I mean, you know what you're shooting, you know your narrative arc, you know everything. You try to plan that, but real life is real life. And so the story comes out, whereas narrative, the whole story was up front, and we had to deal with actors, and I'm good.
Yeah.
I haven't made a lot of narratives, and I've made a few short documentaries. I'm working on a feature documentary, but I have made one or two narratives, and I think the main difference for me was that you kind of have everything in your head, and you're kind of matching what's out here to what's in your head or what you've written or someone else's script. But with documentary, like you said, you go out with a concept, an idea, and the story develops in ways that you never could anticipate, which is what's really magical about documentaries, and I think why people are attracted to making them. And they're real life stories. So it really depends on what your creative vision is. I'm definitely not gonna not make a narrative in my lifetime, but you know, it depends on what story I want to tell. For me, that has always been the driving factor, is, you know, what is the story I'm trying to tell, and what medium would suit that story, rather than be like, I'm only gonna make this, I'm only gonna do that. So that's me.
So I want to say that there's a bunch of, if you think of all the examples of people who actually don't make that separation necessarily, and you have filmmakers who make documentaries that are totally, they're using all the tools of filmmakings and such inventive ways. You know, Bisbee 17 is running now in a theater. It's just a phenomenal film, and it's a documentary, but you wouldn't know that necessarily. Only it reveals that it's a documentary in the making of it. Kitty Green's work, casting Joan Benet, would be another example of just really thinking about the mechanism of filmmaking. You know, you have Donald Herzog that basically looked at his career and he said, it's like, I make films. It's like I don't make even the distinction between them. Frederick Wiseman says the same. You know, so in some ways it's kind of like it's what drives you to make what you make. For me, it's documentary, but I don't make verite films or even traditional documentaries. So, is it still a documentary? Yes, it is. But
yeah, I would affirm that there's progressive, like thinking outside the two boxes when you're thinking about how to approach your storytelling is great. And you know, I would perhaps even more the fundamental difference between the two, if not the storytelling tactics or devices that you're employing, is how you approach production. Because in documentary, you typically have a lot longer of a production period. Sometimes you're, shooting over the course of 6 months or 3 months or a year, or you're shooting and then you're editing and then you're going out and getting more funding. It's very elongated. Producing a feature is not that way at all. You're going into production for a very designated amount of time. You're full force doing it, and then it's done. And it's a lot more, you're inventing a world through production more so than you will in documentary. You have sets and you have costumes and you have actors, and so there is like some genre bending when it comes between the two mediums in those regards as well. And Bisbee 17 is a good example of that. But I think logistically the way you approach production from somebody who's produced both documentary and narrative is quite different, and so is the financing often. Typically, producing narrative is a lot more expensive than producing documentary. Not always, but typically. So yeah, but it depends. I don't know. I love them both. Just to come back to the essence of the question of which one I like more, for different reasons. And I think there's you have to just kind of decide for yourself what appeals. But I would definitely start thinking outside the box about how different really are they, and from a production standpoint, I think it's really how you approach it from a logistical standpoint, more so than from a storytelling standpoint.
Thank you, panelists. Do you think it is possible to only accept work with political social integrity and still make a comfortable living? If so, do you have any tips on how to achieve this?
These are really great questions.
Yeah.
I know.
I don't know. I think at first you say yes to everything, but everything's going to be car commercials and stuff.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to have you work on, I'm going to gauge this audience,
Like
a right-wing
Michael
film,
Moore's film.
But I have colleagues who, they're not in their first years, and they're only 4 years in. They're not like a whole, they're not very far into their career, but they only want to work on social justice films, and they're successful. I mean, it kind of depends on where you land. I think film is such a strong medium to share those stories and to spark discussion and engage an audience. So there's a lot of films about it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think, first of all, it's like the definition. First of all, this is the definition of sustainable living, which we all know is very elastic, and also, where are the red lines, right? So, what are the things that we want to support, and what are the things that we want to believe in? I do know people who basically do a lot of work for hire for nonprofits. So it might pay less, but at least but they might have just steady career, steady work coming in, and it really depends where you are in your life and financially what your needs are. I did work for hire for a tech company. This is some mostly internal stuff, and it sounded like it's very benign. And I have to say that the politics behind it was just appalling, really appalling. And for me, it was, I couldn't turn it down. And then when they decided the following year not to do a trade show with video, I was just like, yes, oh shit, there's still rent to pay. But I really, and I learned a lot from that, and it was totally great to do that. And the guy that I worked with directly is somebody that I really like. And actually, when I got the job, he told me, it's like, I just want you to know, I think that your moral compass is probably better than mine. So if you just need to leave, please don't do it in the very last minute. And we had an agreement. So it was okay. It wasn't, but the more that I think where the future of that technology is going, it is really foul. But it's really different, and the other work that I do for hire is super political and very different, and I totally stand behind it. So maybe one can balance one with the other.
I think it's really respectable to think about your ethics when you're engaging in your work. And you kind of have to decide that for yourself. Everybody's ethics are different. But I would say don't be too hard on yourself. It's really hard to sustain yourself in this field. So don't put so much pressure on yourself, like I can't go do and shoot for Uber or whatever, because it's not within my morals necessarily. Like, you have to pay your bills, and that's okay. And doing those kinds of jobs can allow you to do the social justice work that pays less. So you can think about it as like a trade-off. Like, I'm going to go take this high-paying job so that I can go do this other thing for free, or I can go do this other thing for less pay. So make sure you're supporting yourself and don't be too hard on yourself. I'm able to mostly work on social justice stuff because I'm not always producing and I'm not always working in production. I'm also doing outreach and impact work, and so that on films that are already finished. So that's kind of what's paying my bills right now while I'm doing, while I'm looking for my next producing gig. So I think that there's also a benefit to diversifying your skill set. And taking different kinds of work, and then that's the way that you can kind of align yourself more with the projects that you may feel more passionate about.
Yeah. And even within newsrooms, I've been assigned stories, not many, but I've been assigned stories where I've said I'm not doing that. I'm not going to do that. And there's been conversations and some consequences to that, but it takes a lot for me to go to a place where I'm going to just straight up say no to a boss. But it's been there. I've been there a couple times.
Yeah, definitely the balance, for sure, especially living here. I've done my fair share of social justice, political work for very little or like no pay. And then having to balance it with, more commercial work that pays the bills. Right now, I'm focusing most of my extra non-pay work quota on my own film, so I'm working a more commercial job so that I can have time and money to work on my film, which isn't paying me anything. So yeah.
I also want to raise one other point, which is really to think about yourself as a person. Nobody has infinite resources of themselves. And one does get to a point where you need money, or you need time, or you need something to just wind down. And in the past few years, I had two, beside my film that is hard-hitting criminal justice issue anyway, I had two work for hire. One of them was through the courts, basically working on a death penalty case, and the other one was doing this tech gig that I was just talking about. And between the two of them, they were both incredibly, leave my film alone, which has its own thing, and it was just emotionally incredibly hard. And in some ways, it was a moment that a friend of mine who makes documentaries said once, like, when do we all get to the place where we do the happy puppy sex, type of films? And fair enough, there's Pick of the Litter came out just right after that. But there's a place that it's like it really depends on who do you want to be in a world, what are the options of filmmaking, what are the things that attract you. So on one hand, I felt like really good that I'm making this one piece for the courts, but it was soul crushing. It was really, really hard. Now doing the tech company was soul crushing in another way. It was like, you know, it's like how many drinks can you have after 5? It's like, so it's just something to consider. It's like sometimes it's just better to take, or not better, but you will need to take some dumb, not very emotionally challenging job that just pays something, and because you just need to
bread and
move
butter.
on. Yeah.
I mean, and to that point, yeah, we are also human, and a lot of times I find that I'll come home from working and I'm exhausted. You know, I make dinner and then I'm like, I'm gonna, you know, edit or do this thing and whatever, and I'm just like a zombie. And so it's really important to take care of yourself physically, and if sometimes you can't do it, just don't beat yourself up, you know, like maybe spend 2 hours on the weekend or something, or, you know, like just try to do what you can, but also take care of yourself, because if you're burnt out, then nothing's happening, you know, like really, so.
Thank you, panelists. That's really, really important. That resonates with me, 100%. I have band practice after this, so I go shove some food in my mouth and then go to band practice, and I'm like, oh my god, okay. All right, so we got 2 final questions here, and I think it would be super inappropriate if I don't ask this kind of question. Nomi, you were nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah, there was that.
Yeah. How has your life changed since that experience? What was that experience like?
I was like a zoo. It's like totally weird, and it was. I also want to say it was my first documentary, so it was just truly unexpected. It was. It was weird. It was weird and it was wild. And when the film got nominated, we started going and asking a bunch of other people who've been through the same experiences. What did you do and how was it, and et cetera, et cetera. And we talked to Sarah Gilman. She's a film producer and mostly editor, documentary editor. And she said something really interesting. She says, like, first of all, just so you know, it's like it's not like a one evening. It's like you're gonna work from now until this is over, nonstop. So treat yourself nicely. If you want to wear something nice, just go and buy it, even though you may wear it again or whatever. And she said, but the thing that in the longer run, but she said gave to her, and I can see that was totally true, is some kind of, I would say, confidence after that. She was talking about just being paid better. Which says, like, all of a sudden I go and tell people, it's like, well, this project, I'll edit it for you, but I don't take that rate anymore, I take that rate. And for me, it didn't translate necessarily in the same way, partially because I don't do exactly that type of work, but there's a place that I feel like it's like I can email people very easily. I can just shoot them back an email or reach out and say, it's like, by the way, I'm the person who made that film and I'm looking for help with this and that. Rejection is becoming much nicer, much nicer. It's something within a fairly small documentary community. I feel like people, not all of them, but people definitely know who I am way more than prior to making that film. And I think I'm really kind of like trusting my instincts. It's like, no, that person is not going to be good to work with. This person I want to work with. Actually, my film is not ready. I need to pull back for a year or whatever it is. It's like this bit's change dramatically.
Do you trust yourself more
As
a filmmaker?
I trust myself before that, but now I feel like it's like actually it's not just because I'm in my head, but it's like. No, actually, it's not even, it's more like it's like, no, actually, I don't want to do it, or I'm not ready to do that, or hell yeah, why don't we just do this bit? So these little decisions, sometimes they're bigger, but a lot of the time they're even smaller, but it's just kind of like, I just move them. It's like, actually, I don't like how this thing look.
So you're doubting yourself less.
Thank you, Nomi. And the final question is for Natalie, and this one is also personal to me. When are you going to release The Last Black Man in San Francisco? I even bought the merch, frowny face.
You did brought the
I swear that's a question on here. I did not say that. That's a question. That's a legitimate question.
Well, knock on wood, somebody. 2019.
December?
Well, so I would anticipate that our San Francisco premiere will be at the San Francisco International next April.
Cool.
Yeah. But I mean, we're still in post-production, so we're hoping for Sundance in January. If you can go to Sundance, by the way.
It's so fun.
It's so fun.
So fun.
So I think tickets go on sale like next week or something. Yeah, so if you can go to Sundance. Or San Francisco International is an awesome film festival as well, and that happens in April. There's so many good film festivals in San Francisco, and what's cool is that especially if you do go to Sundance, I mean, Sundance is like, sorry, I'm totally going on a tangent, but if you go to Sundance, there's like 5 things happening all the time, but because it happens so early in the year, you get an understanding of like what are the and then those films, you will see them come out. They'll come to San Francisco to other film festivals. You'll see them come out in theaters. So we're aiming for Sundance in January, but we don't know yet. But despite the festival premiere, we do have a distribution deal. So the film will come out next year, but see it first at SF International, hopefully.
Nice.
All right, you heard it here first, y'all. Wendy, Yasmin, any final plugs for projects you want us to come and see, support?
Well, I'm hoping to get my film done early next year, by spring. So it's called Ace in the Hole for now. But there's also another film called Ace in the Hole from the 50s with Gary Cooper in it. So the name might change.
It's a little while.
Yeah, we'll see. So yeah.
I hope my film's out at the beginning of next year, but also Seeker is always looking for interns. We hire we'll hire somebody straight out of school. We're always looking for contract editors. People we can pull in for a day, and we're pretty nice. It's a pretty fun team. It's pretty good content. It's all science, so it's really fun. So I'm going to put my email address up there if anybody's interested in hearing more about those opportunities. I'm open to chatting.